Hello, everyone. My name is Bruce McConnell. I'm a distinguished fellow at the Observer Research Foundation America, and we are very happy to see you all here this afternoon, or this morning, or this evening, depending on where you are, for this meeting. We are joined here by our partners, the Ministry of Defense of North Macedonia, and we're honored to have with us Minister Radmila Shekerinska Jankovska and her able colleague Alenka Georgieva. Also from our partner, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands, we have Ambassador Nathalie Jaarsma, Jurian Middelhoff, and Petra Timmers. And finally from our civil society partner, the Metamorphosis Foundation, Executive Director Bardil Jashari, Philip Stojanovsky, who will be speaking to us a little bit later on, and Kendresa Suleimani. Let me start by just a couple of housekeeping notes. Please keep your microphones muted if you are not speaking. As you know, we are following the Chatham House rule, which is now showing on the slides. It means basically that the meeting is off the record. You can talk about what happened here, but you're not supposed to identify who said it. We will be posting on the internet the speaker remarks from our expert speakers today, but the discussion will not be posted, so that's off the record. Let me go quickly now over the agenda, and we'll start with some opening messages from the minister and the ambassador, and then move through the topics. We will have a brief opening remarks from one of our experts and a short response from another expert, and then we plan to have some time for question and answer and discussion. So please send questions into the chat, and we will make sure we can get the discussion going quickly that way. If you do submit a question, please include your name and organization in case that's not obvious. That'll help us. And as I've asked the speakers to stick to their time limit, we hope that we'll have some time for questions overall. We'll just run right through this. This is the third virtual regional dialogue that ORF America has held as part of a project which Ambassador Jaarsma will discuss in a minute. We held the first one in Southeast Asia and the second in Southern Africa. Of course, we didn't actually hold them there, but many people in the conferences were there. And we have on the call today our partners from those two regions, the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore and the Research ICT Africa. So welcome, colleagues. This is actually a pre-meeting for an in-person meeting that we intend to hold in the region early next year. So we look forward to seeing many of you there. We'll keep you posted about that and see you hopefully in about a year. All righty, let's get started, and let me begin by asking Minister Jankovska to open with some introductory remarks. The floor is yours, Minister.
Thank you very much, and let me say good afternoon to everyone. Let me say that we appreciate the fact that we could host this meeting, although in this kind of cyber hybrid conferences environment, I don't know actually what constitutes a host, but it gives us the opportunity to say welcome, to share some of our views, but first and foremost to send the message that we are eager to be better in this field, and that we see this goal is achievable only if we cooperate with our neighbors, our friends, and our allies. We have attached importance to cyber defense even prior to our accession to NATO. I remember some of the first strategic defense reviews that we have done in 2017. They have stressed that on top of all the other vulnerabilities in a region that is volatile, sometimes dangerous, chaotic in certain moments, on top of all of them, we started placing cyber vulnerabilities and cyber defense as some of our priorities. But especially during our accession plan and our accession process to NATO, this has moved very high on our agenda as a government. And we have faced the typical shortcomings and the typical dilemma with regards to who can coordinate the process? Who should be involved in the process? Who should be in charge? What are the efforts that you have to do? One of the key problems in working for government institutions is the typical bureaucratic slowness. And in the cyber domain, being slow means failing. So making the initial decisions, how to coordinate between key institutions, how to make the process a bit more efficient, was really critical in the beginning. And I say we have done certain things prior to our accession, but now, as a NATO full-fledged member, this becomes really a priority. And if you combine the fact that our first year of membership was the first year of COVID, with most of our activities moving online, with most of these cyber instruments being the only instruments available, this puts or creates the necessity for really doing much better than we are in the cyber defense domain. I have some good news, and of course I have some bad news. The good news is that according to the National Cybersecurity Index, published by the Estonian Academy for E-Government, North Macedonia has managed to improve its performance by increasing the ranking for almost 20 places just in the last 2 years. So while in the previous years our country was ranked somewhere between 16th and 70th place in the global ranking, the last 2 reports show that North Macedonia has climbed to the 45th place, which sounds great. And I have to commend the several people that I see in this list who have made it possible, not only in the Ministry of Defense, but also across government. But I have to say that this is hardly enough. And I will name just 2 examples because I don't want to go into the details of our cyber defense efforts. There are better experts here that can talk about this. But I will just mention 2 episodes where we as a government, as a country, as individuals became aware of how vulnerable the institutions are, and especially how vulnerable is the confidence of the citizens in their own institutions. The first one happened more than half a year ago when we were going through a round of very important elections. We have had parliamentary elections after our NATO membership, after solving our name issue with Greece, after having a certain breakthrough initially with Bulgaria and some setbacks in the course of last year. And also after making decisions with regards to internal cohesion, which are always very sensitive, the relationship between different ethnic communities, issues such as language use, all these have complicated our political landscape very much in the last 3 years. And they have given rise to lots of populism, lots of fake news, and lots of accusations that have decreased from time to time the confidence of the citizens in their own institutions. So the elections were held in a difficult political context with many things at stake, plus Corona. So we have managed to sail through these turbulent seas when it comes to the normal political problems. But what we did not expect, and unfortunately were not adequately prepared, was the first encounter that we have had with a cyber attack on our election infrastructure. So for the first time, we have had difficult elections in the last 15 years. We have seen different challenges, but it was never connected neither to the IT system nor to the validity of the results. So in the course of elections, which were seen as credible and competitive, which was rare until 2016. So we have made this advancement. We have seen the first attack on the website of the State Election Commission. And practically for a certain number of hours, we have had all eyes of our citizens, NGOs, internationals focused on the website, on the State Election Committee, but without any access to the real information. And this has caused a lot of doubts, lost confidence. Fortunately, It did not produce mistrust vis-a-vis the ultimate results of the elections. But it was very difficult to assess whether it will really destroy the confidence in the election process or whether this is just a temporary hiccup. I have to say that we are lucky that it was just temporary, but it showed how vulnerable we are in areas where we didn't pay attention in the past because they weren't considered to be risks. The second example that I have is actually closer to in time period, but it's still not debated widely through the administration. But I think it's an indication of how this process will develop in the future. A few weeks ago, we have seen that a certain individual, a certain Twitter profile is becoming very active in criticizing the performance of North Macedonia, the performance of its institutions, and the performance of the government, using relatively harsh rhetoric. And he has been identifying himself as an EU expert present in North Macedonia from one of the EU member states. I think that he said that he came from Croatia. And it is true, we actually have a relatively high number of Croatian experts present in North Macedonia through a number of twinning programs. So it made absolute sense that these people are now more aware of the situation, they're actively involved so they can follow it and they can understand the Macedonian environment. But when this profile and the comments started to appear in some of the media outlets in the country, we became a bit more interested. We got some questions from our local media, whether we know who this person is and how come he's rather radical in making political positions vis-a-vis North Macedonia. And just recently, a few days ago, our Secretariat for European Affairs received an official information from the EU delegation in Skopje that there is absolutely no person with this name, with this data, who is here on any EU project. And I think that this marks a new trend where certain structures, which are definitely not pro-European in North Macedonia, are using the fact which undermined them in the past, and this is the high credibility of the EU, to work against EU and work against North Macedonia's accession to the EU. I don't think that we have handled as a government this interesting development appropriately because we were taken by surprise. But this shows what is expected now of us: to be quick, to be vigilant, and to adjust quickly. And I do believe that our key goal in this cyber defense domain will be how to learn fast and how to respond rationally and data-based. In cyberspace, just like in life, you have friends and you have foes. If you're lucky, you know your friends and you might guess your foes. But some of these enemies are actually waiting and ambushing you after a while. And this is why, as I said, these kind of cyber patterns are changing. And if we don't change quickly enough, we will fail. I have to say that this is a reoccurring debate also within NATO. And sometimes we are frustrated by our lack of progress. But when I talk to some of my colleagues, it's not a perfect picture in other well-established NATO member states with more experience than ourselves. We have been lucky that we were able to use some of the experience from cyber experts from the US. Starting from 2018, we have had several teams who have supported us, who have helped us a bit invisibly in the background to learn something, to discover and to present a much better defense line. But I have to say that we will have to do more and better in the forthcoming period. And this is why I appreciate this initiative. Maybe it has to do with the fact that Netherlands is one of the leaders. I remember having a discussion with the chief of the general staff of the armed forces of the Kingdom of Netherlands, Admiral Rob Bauer, some time ago, when he was just a candidate for the head of the NATO military committee. The first information that I got was that his focus is really very much cyber defense. And I do believe that with him being elected, the focus of the alliance will shift in this domain, which is now seen as the operational domain of the alliance. And I have to say that as a member state, we are interested in leading, in joining these efforts. As a ministry, we are currently working on the implementation of the cyber defense strategy. Some of the priorities in this strategy is the establishment of the key cybersecurity authority, security operations center, and the development of a national defense network. We are trying to invest very much in human capital, very difficult to compete in the private sector here, but I believe that there is a priority, and the government is really seriously analyzing the opportunity to be more competitive as an employer, because otherwise we will continue to lag behind. We have focused as part of our attention to fighting fake news and disinformation, not easy. But within the Ministry of Defense, we are shifting now the focus of our public affairs regional center, which has offered typical public relations trainings for many countries in the region and for NATO partners as well. We're trying to develop a niche in fighting fake news and disinformation. And I do believe that as a country in a difficult political context and a difficult political environment, we have some lessons that we have learned, and we have a story to tell. The Ministry of Defense has tried to fight fake news with really strong policy on transparency. And I would like to thank one of our partners today, Metamorphosis, for really pushing the government into more ambitious transparency goal. It is sometimes our key advantage. Sometimes it is seen by certain people as our key weakness, because whenever you expose things, you might more easily be attacked. But we believe that in this security environment, transparency can be our friend, because we preempt some of the potential activities, and becoming the most transparent institution assessed by some NGOs in the country has given us a bit more confidence in our activities and the way we operate. So in the past, we have heard different attacks, fake news attacks, from the fact that we are using depleted uranium together with US armed forces when we do exercises, to accusations about polluting most of the environment around our training sites. By being proactive, by being very transparent, by asking academia and NGOs to measure and be present during these exercises, I think that we have prevented a much scarier anti-campaign in the period towards our NATO membership. Finally, let me say that we live in a time where, as I think Kissinger has said, a laptop can produce global consequences. If this is the case, then we have to really focus on our laptops, on our networks, but also on our defense. And this has complicated our security environment almost beyond recognition. Our focus will remain to change and to adapt, but this change is impossible for a country like North Macedonia and most of the countries in the Western Balkans if we don't cooperate with our allies, with our friends and our neighbors. And this is why, let me conclude by thanking first the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands for initiating this, the Observer Research Foundation, America, and our local partners, Metamorphosis Foundation, for giving us this opportunity and for being such allies. So I would like to wish you a successful event. I'm sorry that I won't be able to participate throughout, because I'm sure that I would have learned many things. but this is something that we need more often and with all of our partners and friends. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Minister, for that report from the front lines. As you say, nobody has got this solved perfectly. Even the major powers have their challenges. So congratulations on all the work that that you guys are doing. It sounds wonderful, and we look forward to working with you in the months ahead. Ambassador Jaarsma, can you give us your perspective?
Certainly. Thank you, Bruce. And dear Minister Shekerinska, thank you very much for your kind words and sharing some of your experiences with us. It is a true honor for me to be co-host with North Macedonia of this session, and a concrete follow-up of the visit of our Chief of Defense, Admiral Rob Bauer, in September of last year. And you, Minister, already referred to that visit. And hopefully this will be the start of a fruitful cooperation on the topic of cybersecurity. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to everyone, and so good that everyone joins today's meeting. We have initiated the Global Cyber Policy Dialogues project with ORF America since we realized that the international cyber policy discussions are in need of broader engagement. Our aim is to create a setting in which we can try and move away from an ideological debate between opposing sides towards a multi-stakeholder common approach by better including all regions of the world, the private sector and civil society. This project provides a space for conversation parallel to those that are taking place at the UN, but outside the existing political framework that can be often stifle direct conversation. It is our intent that the discussions be concrete and specific, thus providing input to feed constructively into existing international fora. The exchange of views, best practices, and multi-stakeholder input must ultimately help to build capacity to create national cybersecurity strategies that recognize regional and international dimensions, reflecting common understandings and approaches to these challenges and contributing to a free, open, and safe cyberspace. The Western Balkans are surrounded by the EU, and as a consequence, cyber risks are as much a risk to us as they are to you. Many of the challenges the region is facing, cyber attacks, cybercrime, and disinformation, to name a few, are unfortunately not new. The good news is that via different platforms, the OSCE, EU, NATO, the Global Forum on Cyber Expertise, there are good opportunities to cooperate, to work together to increase resilience in the digital domain. But what is needed first is putting cyber higher on the public and political agenda. And that is what we are aiming for with this important regional conference. Almost 1 year of cyber ambassadorship taught me that across the globe, there is wide shared feeling of urgency to address the increasing cyber insecurity, not only within governments, but also other stakeholders like the private sector, NGOs, academia, and the technical community underline the urgency to address these cyber threats and work towards norm-based cybersecurity. The Netherlands has been an active and ambitious player in cyber diplomacy. We are strongly committed to the two UN processes, the GGE and the open-ended working group norms debates. We are content with the consensus reached under the open-ended working group recently, but it is important to keep the dialogue on ICTs and peace and security going. We have put strong emphasis on capacity building, but technical and, for example, in the field of international law. We are a founding member of the Global Forum on Cyber Expertise. We have been a strong advocate for accountability and attribution of bad behavior in cyberspace, which has, for example, resulted in the founding of an EU cyber sanction regime. We have also launched a network of cyber diplomats throughout our embassy network to deepen our diplomatic engagement on this issue globally, also in the Western Balkans. The threats in cyberspace are evolving at a very quick pace. The latest Dutch annual cybersecurity assessment notes that increasing digital dependencies result in potential vast disruptions of society if cyber attacks occur. The successful open-ended working group that I just mentioned outcomes shows that it is possible to have inclusive discussions on norms and state behavior regarding cyberspace. As the report has been adopted by consensus by all UN member states, it also shows that they are all committed to adhere to such a framework. More important, it reaffirmed the previous GGE reports as well. Now it is time to bring the current GGE sessions to a successful outcome. Different from the open-ended working group, the GGE discusses the 11 norms agreed in the 2015 report in more detail by providing an additional layer of understanding. Agreement within the GGE will bring the discussion on norms in cyberspace further. Something on capacity building. The success, whether global and regional efforts to promote stability between states will be effective in the long run will depend on the acceptance, application and implementation of practical cyber capacity building measures. This is why it is in our mutual interest to engage in cyber capacity building. In that light, the Netherlands took the initiative in 2015 to establish the Global Forum on Cyber Expertise. Since then, it has matured into a strong and independent capacity building foundation. The Global Forum on Cyber Expertise brings together needs, resources, and expertise of public and private partners. Chris Painter, president of the GFCE Foundation, is one of the next speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to a fruitful conversation this afternoon, and thank you in advance for your active participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Minister. It's, for me personally, it's very inspiring to see two powerful women in the roles that you're both in. And I know that for cyber, it's unusual, especially unusual. So this is really a welcome thing and shows a lot of vision and leadership in your countries. And also, I would note that both of you have, in your early careers, had some IT, ITC, ICT, background and whatnot, so you don't come to this cold. So thank you both for kicking off this discussion. All righty, let's go right into the first session here on peace and security. Basically, we're going to take a look at how Western Balkan states' priorities are being or can be addressed in the international processes that Ambassador Jaarsma just talked about, and how business and civil society, as well as governments, can contribute to the progress of making better peace and stability in cyberspace. And to kick us off here, we'll begin with Vladimir Radunović, who is the Director of E-Diplomacy and Cybersecurity at the DiploFoundation, for brief remarks, and then a even briefer response by Chris Painter, the aforementioned President of the Global Forum on Cyber Expertise, GFCE Foundation. Vladimir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thanks for the invitation, for this opportunity. I think the discussions on this cyber diplomacy aspects of peace and stability are sort of overdue in Balkans, if you wish. I'll try to highlight three particular trends that I think we need to understand better in the Western Balkans, and maybe open a couple of questions. The first trend is rather simple. It's called digitalization of life. Now, in Western Balkans Digital Summit in the previous years, we have, with reason, praised a lot of digital achievements in the region: new e-services, e-government services, software export, even laws and policies, if you wish. But then with the COVID, which has pushed this digitalization steroids of the entire life, if you wish, number of vulnerabilities are exposed, not just in businesses with ransomware, also in critical infrastructure with hospitals. Some resulted with loss of lives, luckily not in Balkans. So the first message would be, maybe to make it easier to Francisca to capture at the end, there is no cyber anymore, and everything is a target. And cyber risks are basically real life risks. Now, I know this is not mainly the message for people here, is rather a message that we should convey further in our regions, that cybersecurity is not for geeks anymore. It's not in, in lifestyle or show business sections of the news, it's mainstream. And if we wish this sort of the approach to cybersecurity needs to be whole of a government, whole of a security, whole of a society. And in a way, cybersecurity is a back or even the front of the same coin of digitalization. The second trend is politicization of cybersecurity. So in a way, the adversaries, the attackers are not script kiddies anymore. They're not geeks, with hoods that we usually see again in media and so on. They're actually more and more very well organized and resource groups, many of them backed by the states or even driven by the states, which means almost unlimited resources and great, motivation to conduct cyber attacks. So that is a game changer. And secondly, the attacks are more and more very high sophistication. Just take a look at recent examples of SolarWinds in the US and so on. They are of a high impact on businesses, on state secrets, on critical infrastructure, with or without the destruction, it doesn't matter. Yet most of them are conducted under the threshold of armed attack, at least the way we understand it. And it's very, very hard to attribute it. So this is causing a lot of problems. So the message would be basically, the risks are really high and they're political, economical, and societal. So in a way, we need to bring more of diversity of policymakers and decision makers, and particularly those on a high level, to come up with a strategic approach, which I think is missing in the Western Balkans, most of the countries. The third trend is the militarization of cyberspace. We're seeing sort of a cyber armament, whatever we define cyber arms, that's a different discussion, in a full swing. We have, at least in Diplo, we've noted 50 plus countries that have some sort of offensive cyber capabilities and developing. That's happening in Balkans as well. Now, the problem is that in Balkans, we don't have transparency on what's actually happening. We pick here and there some media coverage about contracts with China, with US, with Israel, and so on. But we actually don't know what's happening with cyber armament or capabilities in Balkans. We know everything about the missiles, but we don't know anything about these capabilities, and back to transparency that the minister also mentioned. And then we also lack the transparent policies and clear policies on how these capabilities could be used, or how we could respond to foreign operations with similar means. And thus we lack predictability of what's going to happen. And as we usually say, the Balkan is still sort of a barrel of gunpowder. So there is a potential for the increased political, if not military tensions because of cyber operations. We haven't seen any incidents in the Balkans, luckily, but I'm afraid it's a matter of probably years. And we are seeing, that this discussion or cases are shifting not only from US-Russia-China relations, but we are seeing cyber operations between Egypt and Ethiopia over the big dam on Nile. We are seeing the sort of a light cyber war between Israel and Iran. So, and we are seeing more and more of the non-state hacker groups, which are even more hard to control also in Balkans. Escalation in Western Balkans, I know there are a lot of debates in the US, again in the US Russia-China context, but escalation in regions like Western Balkans is quite possible in terms of turning into further sort of tensions. Now, there are good news, and Ambassador Jaarsma mentioned some of them. There are global and regional processes and dialogue and agreements among all the countries, including now the last one, all the countries of the UN, over the rules of the road. That means how the international law applies to cyberspace. It's not easy, but there are some first steps that it applies. Then the norms, what the states should and should not do. Most important for us in Balkans, I think, is the confidence building measures. Some of them are being done in the UN group of governmental experts, open-ended working group. The CBMs are particularly worked in the OSCE, which I think is relevant for us. There is a number of multi-stakeholder fora, such as the Paris Call for Trust and Security in Cyberspace, the Global Forum on Cyber Expertise, certainly, Geneva Dialogue on Responsible Behavior in Cyberspace. But we as Western Balkans are actually not there. If you look at numbers, within the GG in the last 15 years or even more, since 1998, if you wish, when the process started, we only had Serbia, which was a member of the GG at one point, and it was mainly due to internal efforts in Serbia and the community. In the open-ended working group, we had a single written contribution from Serbia, Montenegro took the floor twice to speak on CBMs and partnerships, and there was a contribution by EU on behalf of the Republic of Macedonia, Montenegro, Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, but that's the EU, basically. So we were not there, really. In the OSCE, Serbia is quite active on one of the CBMs, Albania with France on the other, but that's about it. In the GFC, I'm sure Chris can reflect on that more. It's actually from the Western Balkans, it's only Serbia there, even though there are possible partners from other companies and organizations. And more importantly, we don't have any official regional dialogue on cyber and digital aspects, political dialogue, right? So the message would be cybersecurity is about regional peace and stability, and Western Balkans has to be involved in this process. We need to strengthen foreign policy and diplomacy efforts. And I'll close with a couple of problems. Now, there are a lot of good things. I mentioned we have formal policies in place in Balkans, in most of the countries. They're getting better. We have people in institutions, in organizations, in businesses. We have some models of public-private partnerships which are quite praised on a global level, such as this Petnica cybersecurity informal group in Serbia. But we don't have clear understanding of political risks. We don't have policies on preventing and addressing these political risks. We lack awareness about the importance of connecting the government with business and non-state actors in this peace and stability realm. We lack cyber diplomacy capacities and structures. There is no single cyber ambassador in the region, not even the MFA officials or departments within the Ministries of Foreign Affairs dealing with cyber. And if you run through the list of today's participants, there is no single MFA person today besides the Netherlands. We don't have MFAs here in the process. There is no real presence of Western Balkans in these international processes. And importantly, I think that's the key, we lack awareness of the highest level, political levels, about real prioritization on political agenda of these issues. So the message would be, we need to build capacities and structures for cyber diplomacy to address the issues, and we need to engage in a regional dialogue on this. And I'll close with just an information that I'm happy to share that Diplo on its side, as a global educational institution, we have launched a new online course on cybersecurity diplomacy for diplomats and governments, but also businesses, NGOs, and so on. I'll share the link in the chat. So we welcome applications from the Western Balkans as well. We should use these opportunities. And the GFC is another opportunity, which is not seized enough, but I'm sure Chris will reflect more on that. Back to you, Bruce.
Thank you, Vladimir. What a great kickoff and really sketching out the stakes here. Chris, I think you got a good introduction, good segue for you. Take it away.
Yeah, thanks. And just reflecting on a couple of things that were said. I mean, first of all, I think this one is a real problem. The Western Balkans haven't been as involved as they need to be. This certainly is an issue that goes beyond cyberspace, and that's something Vladimir said. And I think it's an important issue because we really need to mainstream this issue as a core policy issue for all countries, but including the countries in this region, as something that's a national security issue, it's an economic security issue, it's a human rights issue, and it's a foreign policy issue. And I agree that it is unfortunate that as more countries are developing cyber expertise in their foreign ministries, and now I think we're over 45 countries who have cyber ambassadors, cyber envoys, cyber people in their foreign ministries. It's unfortunate that there's none in that region. I think that's important, and that helps transfer this from thinking about this, at a policy level, at a leader level, from a technical issue to one that really is this core issue that is not just cyber, but interweaves with your future prosperity and also your future security. And so that's why this is so important. So certainly agree with that and what we need to do, and also agree with the importance of some of the activities that have been going on, the UN and others. And I'll focus a bit on capacity building, because representing the GFC, that's my my position. And I'd say there, the only, as was mentioned, Serbia and the other regional member is Romania, and that's it. So there's lots of room for other countries to be parts of the GFCE. That's thegfc.org, and I'll post that in the chat as well, which is a multi-stakeholder group. So it's countries, over 60 of them, civil society, private industry, academia, to try to help with this capacity building. And more particularly, although it deals with capacity building writ large, it really focuses in part on a couple of things that were mentioned. One is how we take forward some of these agreements, these norms that were reached in the UN. This is not a negotiating platform, but it's a way to try to implement them, to make them real for countries in the region and around the world. So that's one, I think, very important area. And make sure that there are national strategies that reflect the political priority of this. So I think getting involved in the Global Forum on Cyber Expertise is an important area, not just for dealing with cyberspace, but to make this more of a mainstreamed issue for your governments, and to tie in with the various stakeholders that were mentioned, the civil society and private sector and governments coming together. I was struck in the UN Open-Ended Working Group how many countries raise capacity building as a foundational issue. And I really think it is. It's foundational to all these other things that we're trying to do, including negotiations. And you know, the problem is if you're left out of these negotiations, if you're not actively participating in them, other people are steering your future. And so that's why it's very important, I think, for the region to be involved. The other thing I'd comment on, you mentioned the militarization, growing militarization of cyberspace, and I think that is an issue. And again, this goes beyond just the cyber domain, where we're worried about instability writ large. You know, what the world will look like, and what will be the next match that could light a fire, because so many countries are developing military capabilities, but there's no real understanding of how those military capabilities are used. And again, I'll end just with an invitation that I agree with everything that was said. My invitation is, would very much welcome countries in the region and other stakeholders being more involved in the Global Forum on Cyber Expertise. We think, as Bruce said, this is a long-term process, and really want to work with the region to help facilitate these discussions in the future. So thank you.
I want to turn now to our second session on cybersecurity and cybercrime and how it can be prevented and improved in the region, and the role of international organizations in doing that. And we have one speaker here, Vilma Tomko, the Director General of the Albanian National Authority for Electronic Certification and Cybersecurity. I'll ask her a question or two. The floor will be open for discussions after that. So take it away, Vilma.
Thank you, Bruce. I'm here as your invitees. And let's say that I am more focused on the cybersecurity, but also considering that this both cybersecurity and cybercrime goes in parallel with each other. You know that the difference is that cybersecurity is something that is related to the states, it's related with the government, it's related with critical and important information infrastructures. So it's related with, let's say, with business and with, continuity of the businesses in general. When it comes to cybercrime, it is more focused on the individuals. So what we have to say, how to ensure that the cybersecurity is integrated in the digital economy or at the development of initiatives. Firstly, we have to mention that each country has to have a full framework, regulatory framework, including all the main actors of the fields. So it has to begin with a national strategy in the cybersecurity with very clear objectives for each stakeholders that has to be included in it. And it has to be a kind of guidelines for the country how to implement and how to secure the cybersecurity in itself. So mainly in this national strategy, all the actors like national banks, national authorities on cybersecurity, national regulatory bodies, state police, cyber laws experts, etc., has to be included. And to implement and to achieve this objective stated in this national cybersecurity strategy, all actors has to keep in mind that first they have to express the measures about protecting critical information infrastructure as the main focus of the cybersecurity. And after, it has to be clear the relation between the actors for the better achieving the target. And the third one is that I have to mention and to stress the most important one is the establishment or the role of the national CSIRT, National Center for Cybersecurity, and their preparation and the maturity. So as I see in the region, we have done a lot to complete the legal framework. So we have in place, in general, all our Western Balkans economies. We have national strategies in place, very well targeted with very clear objectives. We are trying to establish the relation between the actors, and not only in the country, but also with the cross-border, in the cross-borders. But what is more important, we have to establish and to put in the main, in the middle of all these actors, the role of the national CERT. So I think, and I suggest that all the Western Balkans economy need to establish and to put in full capacity operation this national CERT, even that we are strongly working on that objectives, but we have a lot to do. What I think has been bad, but also good for us, was this new situation of the pandemic that has made us to see that moving on the online work, all government has moved online, all businesses has moved online, schools, students, children, everybody has been online. So it has been, let's say, a once per life possibility for these criminals to have more freedom to attack and to perform these criminal actions. So in this moment, the role of the cyber expert has been more come in the first place and in the focus, and even that they also works online, we have seen the needs for the cybersecurity expert. It is, I have had a figure coming from ISS, sorry, just a second, from ISSA that say that there was an increase in 63% of the cyber attacks during this pandemic. So in both cases, we saw that there is need for job, there is need for experts. Both of them, we can say, yes, we need, and we saw the need for the new places in the cybersecurity, and the need also for the good experts in the field. And what it is needed to be done is to work a lot toward the capacity buildings of the existing cyber expert in the fields, and also for creating the new one expert. I can say that new trends are coming out in this moment in the region. So we have been the first that has embraced the EU initiatives, Women for Cyber, because we saw that right in this moment, there is a need for cyber expert, but there is a possibility that a lot of tech women in STEM, be also women in cyber. And Albania, North Macedonia, Serbia as well has embraced this initiative, and a lot of activities are in place. So the bad is also accompanied with some good action in place. As Bruce also mentioned about the cybercrime, the need for several actions to be protected, like the actions to have a business continuity plan, the possibility to be connected from outside the office. All this that are accompanied, we say, with a lot of cybercrime. We need also to prepare the experts, cybercrime experts. And we need also to raise the capacities in the state police. That means that not only in the center, let's say, but we have to expand the needs for cyber experts also in the regions and in all the country, because if we saw that kind of enthusiast or a hacker try to attack the systems, the cybercrime try to attack the individual, their bank accounts, so they can create really damage to the individual. So it is needed to raise the capacities of the cyber experts in the state police in all levels, not only in the centers. So these are my, let's say, big topics mentioned about going in parallel of cyber security and cybercrime, but also we have not to let aside our works toward the citizens, because also citizens are users of e-services, users of banks services, etc. So they have to be aware of the online tools or means they are using, and there is a need for national awareness about the citizens, covering all levels, beginning from the youngsters at the schools, or let's say at the first level of the schools, and to the students, until to the employees, users, employees, citizens, but also to the elders that also have to use several e-services that now are online. You can, you maybe have the information that also in Albania, there is a huge number of e-services that now are offered by the government portal online to the end users. And so it is really needed a good awareness campaign, and also several skills to them how to be protected online from these cyber criminals.
All right, so now we're going to turn to our third topic regarding which we sort of opened up with the minister's remarks, and that has to do with information disorder and the proliferation of false information in cyberspace, and all the issues that have come up that we're all quite aware of on this point. So rather than describe this problem myself, I'm going to turn it over to the experts. And we have two great speakers. Filip Stojanovski will kick us off with he's the Director of Partnership and Resource Development at Metamorphosis. And he'll be responded to by Nicholas Pangiatou, who is an associate professor at the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. And the floor is yours, Filip.
Thank you so much for this great opportunity to exchange experiences and to gain new knowledge for us. At Metamorphosis, we are working on the issue of fighting disinformation for quite a while. And we come to this area from the background of promoting digital rights, so human rights in the digital sphere, which also include elements of cybersecurity, starting with protection of safety and human rights of children online, which we have been doing for more than a decade, and also promoting the digital agenda, which is a European Union initiative that is also addressing the Western Balkans and is an umbrella strategy, if we can say, to digitize and to help improve quality of life and good governance in the region and beyond. But to focus on countering disinformation, we realized that there is not one silver bullet on one solution for countering disinformation, especially the disinformation which is related to cyber security and all the other issues mentioned today, because we see with these hybrid attacks, or in the parlance of the previous decades of the Cold War, it was called special warfare. So it's combination of non-military means to achieve basically military goals of defeating the enemy. And if you are considered an enemy, then you can expect that these attempts to compromise the society, the working of the society, and are always related to spreading disinformation, which promotes distrust among different communities. In North Macedonia, as a multi-ethnic country, it's especially important point of problems, and all over former Yugoslavia and the Balkans also, but also distrust in the working of the democratic system, and which is one of the hallmarks of illiberal populism, or the similar movements which have done so much damage in the last few years in the democratic world also. So to sum it up, I would like to share I'm basing the talk on the joint experiences of Metamorphosis team. For over 16 years, we try to create synergies between different aspects of society, and to showcase this as an advice. And our basic message is that multi-stakeholder cooperation is the key to solving such complex problems. We started with research and monitoring of the situation from the aspect of digital rights promotion, but we quickly realized that the whole sphere of human rights, including freedom of expression, has largely moved online or is in the process of digitalization. And therefore, this aspect of cyber everything has become mainstream. So usually we don't even differentiate between ICTs and non-ICTs in this sense, but we also think that it's important to keep all the venues for communication open. So not to neglect the traditional media or traditional mode of communication. I will use the example of fact-checking in the service of media literacy. We started with political fact-checking through the Truth Meter. We expanded to the need to address the media, the proliferation of manipulations in the media through the media fact-checking, as you can see on the slide. And then we realized that we have to take into account the social networks, but also word of mouth and all other means of communication which facilitate spread of disinformation through our initiative supported by the European Union, Critical Thinking for Media-Wise Citizens. In order to provide synthesis, we also think that the role of the media is crucial. So mainstreaming the discussion of both disinformation disorder and the cybersecurity into the mainstream sphere and into the sphere of online discussions of online media is key, because as an organization we see that the capacity building of both institutions but also of the public to understand the challenges that we are facing is very important. Right now all over the world there are misconceptions about how to fight disinformation, because of course there is strong propaganda invested in reducing these capabilities of our societies. And therefore we think it's important also to invest in digital literacy, and we view digital literacy as a segment of the media literacy and critical thinking sphere. So therefore our experience is that it's very important to invest and to engage the civil society, especially grassroots organizations, which we do through sub-granting through some projects, and also the local media, in order to create a capability at a local level also, not only at national level or at the level of the capitals. And of course, to engage citizens directly through social networks, to enable them to ask questions, to share their misconceptions, and then to feedback and to create lifelong learning structures, which are sometimes informal, but need to also to be embedded into the formal education system. That's why we advocate inclusion of media literacy and critical thinking in the primary, secondary schools and universities. Next slide, please, Abigail, if you may. In this sense, it's important to promote networking. So far, we have very good experiences in promotion of networking as an aspect of fact-checking by engaging and teaching local media during the last elections to identify and counter disinformation at local level, those that affect their own community. They might be disinformation about politicians at national level, they might be about local officials, but it's important to engage people within their communities. And this was one example. It's also important to work at regional level, which I will refer to in a minute, and also at global level. As member of the international fact-checking network. We have been involved in the related area of fighting misinformation about the COVID pandemic for a year now. And it was crucial that this common fight continues, because it provided so much material for us at local level and at national level and at regional level to both compare the disinformation, which is a global phenomenon and often adapted to local circumstances, and to feed back to the community, creating a joint response. I think the same approach that the fact checkers take through the international fact-checking network can be taken at level of a society by different stakeholders. So enabling, for instance, journalists and officials to work better together and to increase both the transparency and the opportunity of the public to learn more through addressing the issues of disinformation, but also, as is noted in the agenda, this shows that social media platforms can have a good role, and the structure provided by the IFCN of verified fact checkers was a good match for the need of social media platforms to address the issue of disinformation by journalistic means. And therefore, we joined the Facebook third-party fact-checking partnership last year, which is addressing the disinformation particular to the platform. And we have had some very good results, up to the point that both the people who share this information and whose disinformation is marked as false, and which is backed up by arguments of the fact checkers, then remove that disinformation by themselves or correct it in case of media. And increasingly, this becomes a trend of media who see that there can be consequences of public discussion about the quality of their work, rather than backfiring, as in the past, when these media were part of state-supported systems for disinformation. When they're on the open market, they try to adjust to the conditions, and if the conditions of the system are not prone to disinformation, then the media would strive to improve their quality. Next slide, please.
So I have to ask you to finish up here, Philip. We're running out of time.
Yes, of course. We also address the issue of, and needs to address the issue of cross-border disinformation, especially in the Balkans. This issue is very important because some of the media spheres overlap, or the citizens of different countries have access, and journalists, to information, and with that disinformation from the neighboring countries. That's why some of the leading organizations who promote journalism or fact-checking or other aspects of fight against disinformation have formed the Anti-Disinformation Network for the Balkans. You can read more, of course, there. And I would end up with two more assertions. Next slide, please, Abigail. So there are a lot of disinformation examples which are present in the region.
Yeah, we'll make these slides available to the participants. Yeah.
Yes, of course. But it is important to note that this type of disinformation can have the potential to affect not one country but more, and to endure for years, even in different versions set for a typical some particular political moment, like elections, referendums, or whatnot. All this information, unless it's addressed at systematic level, unless everybody knows it's false, it can return. And next slide, please. It is important also to research. Our research has determined that there is a lot of proclivity or openness of our populations in the Balkans to conspiracy theories and ways of thinking which are enabling spread of disinformation. And next slide, please, and the last. The analysis of the anti-disinformation content and of the most impactful disinformation from last year also shows that their disinformation does not function on its own. It's followed by hate speech, discrimination, and other forms of creation of disorder in society, which can harm the social cohesion and lead to conflict and vulnerabilities. That's why I would just reiterate that it's important to work on reform of the education system, but not only on the formal one, but also to view the media and the civil society as drivers of education for adults, for people who are outside of the formal education system, especially the national broadcasting media who use state resources. Thank you.
We have a really great case study here that Niklaus is going to produce. So the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much for the invitation as well, and also the previous speakers that for their excellent presentations. I think, and I will start from the last point that Bruce highlighted, that and also Philip before, that there is, I think that there are a lot of very good initiatives in the area, but what it misses, what we miss actually, it is to coordinate these efforts. What we have, what we confront actually, it is that we confront entities that they are really organized, structured, while we are not so well structured, despite that we have a lot of good ideas. I think what it is needed, it is actually to compile these ideas in a very strong network. This is the network that we have formed with Metamorphosis and Philip, in order actually to combine actually these initiatives. Another initiative that I will speak about and present you today is the one that we run as Digital Communication Network Southeast Europe Hub, and it's called the Fake News Hunters. I'm head of Digital Communication Network Hub. I have sent you through the chat the link to our webpage. What Fake News Hunters is about, it's not about debunking, because what we actually have understood, it is that while there are a lot of important and very good fact-checking initiatives, still there's a lot of disinformation flooding around. Still people are willing to believe in these stories. So we thought that it is an important element. It is actually to complement these efforts together by analyzing the narratives and the discourses that make these new fake news stories circulate around. Because what we have understood, and that's the essential point of Fake News Hunters, that our responses should not be only technological ones. Because our major ally in fighting and cyber threats and actually strengthening our democracies, as it has been highlighted in many incidents between North Macedonia and Greece, immediately after the Prespes Accord, we have seen a lot of these attacks. But what we have seen that it is that we need to have our societies along together with us. How do we do that? Through actually analyzing the discourses upon which fake news are being built, and this is why we have chosen the title Fake News Hunters. Can we move to the next slide, please? So the Fake News Hunters is an innovative project initiated in April 2020 by DCN Southeast Europe Hub, which is I'm head, Forum Apollon from Romania, and Peace Journalism Lab, which I'm director of Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, the biggest university in Thessaloniki. So our aim was to examine misinformation spread on social media, to determine the most popular topics and define similarities and differences between different countries. What we aim to do is analyze the mechanism through which actually fake news are being widespread and alert our societies not to believe them. Because what we have seen that we need actually to build up competencies through media literacy, through news literacy initiatives, but also through especially analyzing and targeting these fake news stories that are very popular. The project started with Greece and Romania, and it expanded continuously. It includes Greece, Georgia, Italy, Romania, Serbia, and now Moldova as well. and soon Kosovo will actually be part of it. Can we move to the next slide, please? So what we have done as fake news hunters, it is that we have published 5 reports, and 100 plus profiles have been analyzed, 4.5 K social media posts have been detected, and 35 key reach on Facebook for the posts related to fake news hunters project. I will just actually bring to your attention that our aim was not actually to be another fact-checking organization, but rather was actually to develop ways in order to correspond to these stories. Because what we have seen is that even if you tell people that a story is not true, they still contribute in distributing it. So what we have to do, it is to move to the next step, and we go to the next slide, please, to debunk these stories. Because by debunking these stories, it is a very effective way in order to undermine to undermine and prohibit these stories to reach them. What was an impressive element that we have found, it is that the 5 top stories that we have seen in social media in Greece and Romania, in all the countries examined, they were identical. So this means that we have to deal with entities that have a specific aim in order to spread this fake news. This aim was actually to tackle technological competencies, attacks against 5G, our democracies, by actually attacking trust of citizens in democratic societies, and most importantly, by promoting a positive image, such as vaccine diplomacy, we name it, in order to promote the competencies of other entities that are either reside that it is either Russia or comes from China. And the results of this work that we have done regarding vaccine diplomacy will be presented in a webinar that we will have on next Wednesday, 22nd of April. So fake news hunters, and this is my last point, complements the work that has been done in many levels, and the most important one, that it stands out as a network of organizations that aim actually to tackle fake news and disinformation and build resilient societies. Thank you very much.
I'm going to move ahead now to our concluding remarks and invite Franziska Klopfer, who is the project coordinator for Europe and Central Asia Division, Geneva Center for Security Sector Governance, DCAF. And many of you will be familiar with the work that DCAF has been doing in the region around cyber. Our goal in this workshop today, and also in the continuing work that we'll be doing in the region, is to complement what Franziska's organization and others are doing, not create additional things that are overlapping and duplicative. So the floor is yours, Franziska. Thanks so much for giving your views on what you've heard so far today.
Thank you very much, Bruce, and thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me and to speak at the end of this very interesting webinar. I will try to kind of, in just 4 points, summarize some of the issues that were raised today and maybe add to it. And I have to say, a lot of my comments also are informed by the work that DCAF, my organization, has been doing in the Western Balkan region. And Bruce just mentioned our project is one of the biggest regional projects in cybersecurity, funded by the UK government. And it concentrated on the one hand a lot on national cybersecurity governance processes, improving the coordination, cooperation amongst national cybersecurity actors. And we worked, as you might have heard also from others already, a lot with helping national certs to improve their capacities and their standing in the political ecosystem and or cybersecurity ecosystem of their country. And we have also, through the project, managed to really increase the cooperation amongst national certs in the Western Balkans. So to move from a situation where there was little awareness of each other to actual cooperation at operational level. But all of this work and the work that we continue doing really taught us a number of lessons, and I saw a lot of that reflected today in the discussions. And I think my first point that I want to share with you is that I think it's important when you talk about cybersecurity, improving cybersecurity, working on cybersecurity in the Western Balkans, that any kind of progress that we want to work on has to be very context specific and targeted, and that it's we know that obviously in the general knowledge that you cannot apply just one assistance model to any country, but especially in this region where we've heard a lot about things that are still missing, but I think what needs to be underlined that there's a lot of progress as well. So all of the countries have already achieved quite a bit, and the any kind of additional support that they would get would have to work with the capacities that are already there. But what we, for example, saw is that a lot of the support is important in increasing cooperation, coordination amongst different actors. And we also heard that today a lot, especially Vilma Tomko in her presentation when she emphasize the needs of the different actors that are present in her country in Albania, but it's the same for the other countries to find ways of working together. And I think there when we talk a lot about this public-private cooperation, which was also mentioned by I think basically all of the speakers, is it's important to find real solutions for this public-private cooperation. Vladimir and others mentioned the work that we did together with DiploFoundation also in the OSCE in developing public-private cooperation models, for example, in Serbia, which is now the Cybersecurity Network Foundation. So my point is that, the working in the countries on cybersecurity and cybersecurity capacity building needs to take into account the countries have made quite some progress. There are some, or number of limitations to that, which is cultural and historical, political as well. There was a mention that the issue of cybersecurity is not the highest political priority yet, which I think is very important to emphasize. But that working within these limitations, you have to develop approaches which are targeted to the country. Then the second point is what we really heard a lot is that cybersecurity is basically not just that it's now on more and more people's awareness, because it is an issue that's really transversal, and it has such a breadth in terms of the policy issues that it touches on. And several speakers, including Ambassador Jaarsma, was mentioning the importance of mainstreaming this within the different policy areas. And I think this is really a message that is important for the region, that you build capacity in all different policy areas on cybersecurity. And as several speakers mentioned, especially at this level of cyber diplomacy, to give the countries an opportunity to also engage in international discussions on cybersecurity, and especially in the context of norm development. And that's my third point, is really the importance of seizing the opportunities for regional, European, and international cooperation in cybersecurity, which countries have done but can still do more about. And as the speakers in talking in the last session, talking about disinformation, underlined is that these obviously we all know that cybersecurity is a transnational issue, but even as they meant the example showed, even disinformation moves across borders and needs to be looked in a regional or even wider context. And as it was mentioned in the first session, that diplomacy or e-diploma is really an opportunity to put to help put cybersecurity in a higher political agenda, and to create greater awareness that that more needs to be done at national level as well. The importance of working in general at the political level or have a political cooperation at regional international level was emphasized when for work, as I said, working together on norms, getting involved in these international discussions to also then help countries to better implement those norms. The importance of greater getting engaged in these opportunities that already exist on confidence building, as for example the OSCE confidence building measures. All of these opportunities that are very important should be taken. But one point that I want to emphasize in terms of regional cooperation is really this cooperation of capacity building. This is something that we at DCAF have identified as really one of the great opportunities for the region, where they can, because resources are scarce in the countries, we have seen that regional capacity building, this peer learning, really is a great way of improving capacities. And it's also an issue that was mentioned, that GFCE, for example, is one platform for countries coming together to share and to learn. We had a conference at the beginning of March, also on regional on cybersecurity capacity building in the Western Balkans, where we floated an idea about having maybe a regional hub for cybersecurity capacity building. So I think that's another idea maybe that we can be discussed in the future. And then just my last point is about coordination, as was mentioned by several speakers. Given that we have all these great opportunities, several initiatives by DCAF and others that were mentioned. RCC, there's a colleague here who shared her experiences in the chat. The OSCE, the US, and the Netherlands, and in projects by ITU and others. So the importance of the coordinating these efforts as we want to avoid overlap and redundancies, and therefore we need to think about ways of how we can organize this coordination. Two very practical at the lower level ideas were, one was mentioned by the colleagues in session 3. Just have basically set up networks of different organizations who work together, as they talked about their network on different organizations working on disinformation. Another opportunity is to create pooled funds for projects. But I think what is also very important is to have the discussion between donors and implementers, but most importantly to capacitate the countries, the beneficiary countries, that they have a clear opportunity to identify and communicate their needs and the support that they would need. So this is that was my last point. And thank you very much, Bruce, for giving me the opportunity.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the work that DCAF is doing in the region. I think we got from this conversation a lot of good suggestions and ideas about ways that the donors can cooperate together, and also ways that countries can cooperate better on operational level as well as a policy level. So I think a lot of work to be done, and we will be following up on some of these conversations in the months ahead. We will also keep all of you informed about the next version of this conference, which will be in person next year, assuming that the virus lets us do that. Does anyone have any last minute remarks, Nathalie or anybody, to send us off, or shall I end the meeting?
Oh, I would like to thank everybody for all their contributions, and of course this this is like a very good session that creates appetite for more. So I very much look forward to visiting the region. I was just emailing with our ambassador in Skopje, Dirk Jan, so we will definitely have this in-person meeting, and I hope we can go into much more detail then, and to also meet you all in person. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you also to our partners, the North Macedonia Ministry of Defense and Metamorphosis, as I would say it. Thank you all for coming. We will post the results of this in a week or two, and we'll keep you posted. Thank you again.